Youth in Society is a 30-minute program that focuses on diversity-related issues that are pressing and need serious rebirth or address. Today on Youth in Society, I am your presenter, Nathan Willie, the founder and executive director of S.E.I.L Incorporated. And today we have a very special studio guest who is widely known for his dedicated time and work in the Youth in Society in ensuring that Liberia becomes a better nation. Today on Youth in Society, as our studio guest to discuss the topic, the importance of the National Youth Manifesto in this election and after the election, I have with me Attorney Kanyo Bagbala as our studio guest. Mr. Bagbala, you are honorably welcome to Youth in Society today.
Thank you, Nathan.
Great. So to the discussion, can you just tell us a bit about yourself? Although I did, a profile of you, but I'd like for us to know extra things that you'd like to add. I didn't mention.
Well, once again, thank you, Nathan, and thank you to your team and to S.E.I.L for the opportunity to appear on your show. I think what you are doing is a great service to not only the young people of Liberia, but also to our country at large and to the African continent, because I understand that you're disseminating this program across Africa on satellite TV. So I think that's a great piece of work that you're doing here. Kanyo Bagbala, 16 years ago, I left Cathedral Catholic High School, where I did high school education. I graduated, I like to say, at the top of my class as class valedictorian. While I was there, I also served as prefect of our senior class. I was editor-in-chief of our press club. Wow. I was captain of our debate team. I graduated and then I went on to the Stella Maris Polytechnic, where I obtained an associate degree in accounting, firstly, magna cum laude, and then went on to get my bachelor's also from the Stella Maris Polytechnic. Again, not satisfied with those a little bit of education, I then matriculated to the Louis Arthur Grimes School of Law, which is the only law school within the Republic of Liberia, where I obtained my Bachelor's of Law, LLB. But what is most important for me, during that educational sojourn within Liberia, is that every step of the way I've tried to work to advance leadership and vision within the sectors that I've operated. So even while I was at the Stella Maris Polytechnic, I was Secretary General of our Student Representative Council, and during that time we made it our business to encourage and to provoke activities on campus that sought to bring more people into the fold. And then at law school again, I was president of the Law Students Association, and during our time there again, we tried to find ways to provide academic scholarship for people who are high achievers and seeking assistance. But if you ask me at the end of the day, who am I think I'm just a young man seeking to advance youthful enterprise in our country, in Liberia. Also to offer ourselves as an inspiration to other young people that despite the war years, the post-conflict environment, I think we can still excel as young people, and we should not take that very lightly.
Well, you heard it for yourselves. He has a very huge profile. It's so voluminous that if we give him the entire day, he will continue to go. Like I said, he's been working dedicatedly in that field as it relates to helping young people become who they want to be. And today, we're very happy here to have him as our studio guest. And today, like I said, we'll be looking at the National Youth Manifesto. Now, Mr. Attorney Bagbala, pardon me. The National Youth Manifesto was a document I was signed on April 28, 2017, and it was given birth to by the Federation of Liberian Youth, the umbrella organization of all youthful organizations within Liberia. And the reason for the creating of such very important document at this critical juncture in our society is, predicated upon the fact that we need to hold political parties accountable for decisions that they make, especially as it relates to the youthful sector. So with such backdrop, the National Youth Manifesto was created and signed previously by 8 political parties. And then since the signing, Federation of Liberian Youth with its partners, including NEMO and others, they've been doing, the implementation part of the policy by reaching out to different electoral districts in political areas and creating a platform wherein the constituents can have a dialogue or interaction with their leaders or will-be representatives to come. So this document, I like to say, what's your take on the National Youth Manifesto as somebody who's directly involved with the workings of young people?
Well, I think it's a very great document, and I have a personal relationship with the National Youth Manifesto because I see it as the culmination of a series of things that we did close to 12 years ago, which I'm about to explain. In 2005, there were many young people like myself, very, very young then, even I still don't classify myself as a young man now, who had gone to Kakata in Magibi County. And our going to Kakata was provoked by the fact that after the civil crisis, young people, mostly ex-combatants, Yana boys, there was a sense of desperation. And a few of us who were in school at the time believed that it was important for the national government to pay special attention to the issue of young people in our country. And so we got together with support from a few partners, the Federation of Liberia Youth, and we convened at the National Youth Conference at the BWI campus in Kakata. At that conference, of which I serve as chairman of the drafting committee, we came up with what is now known as the Kakata Declaration, which was the, if I may say, the mother document that gave rise to the National Youth Policy and that eventually gave rise to the National Youth Act that has been passed into law, and now we have a manifesto. So to come back to your specific question about what I think it's important to begin to hold people who want to be leaders of our country. And as you know, political parties are the vehicles through which leadership is passed on or countries are transitioned. To hold them accountable to these type of things. I've looked at the Youth Manifesto, like I said, it mostly brings back the issues that we raise for young people. The question of quality education, the question of employment and empowerment, the question of meaningful participation. And on the question of meaningful participation, you may know that I am contesting as representing District Number 3 of Montreal County. All right, and considering myself as a young man, meaningful participation means as a young person having a voice in what happens within your country. And for that, I don't mean tokenism, I don't mean superficial voice. When you are in a space where you can make decisions that will affect other young people. And the point is, look at after all these years, since 2005, when we worked together in National Youth Policy, now we have a law, now there's a manifesto, it's been passed by the legislature. But if we grade implementation, you'll find out that we are solely lacking behind in terms of implementation. And I think that's why this manifesto is very, very important.
So the manifesto is the implementing arm of those other policies or laws that were created way back, like you mentioned, the National Youth Policy and the National Youth Act of 2013. So, like in Liberia, we normally face a problem of implementation. So, with the high level of engagement in ensuring that we have a manifesto that is directly youth related, and today we are seeing this manifesto, I must say I'm very happy, and I must applaud you for your personal dedication in ensuring that such a document is created for political parties to be accountable, and I like the word accountable, for decisions they make as to how it can trigger down a positive effect on the younger generation, since Liberia has a majority of youthful population. Do you think Liberia has done enough as it relates to creating a youth inclusive society? Do you think we've done enough?
Well,
from the level of the government?
I think to put it in context and be fair to what has transpired in our country since 2005, because that's when we came from war in 2003. We held our first post-conflict democratic elections in 2005. So you can begin to now look at governance in our country from 2005 to now. That's just to put it in perspective. I would say, with all due regard to Madam President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, that the first 6 years were about reinventing and reconsolidating democracy in our country. Not a lot of tangible things were done, but again, it's not to say that more could be done, because we had to rebuild the institutions, rebuild the mindset that Liberia now is a country again and not the failed state or the pariah state that most people refer to before. But then we come back in the second term, which is where I then believe that a lot more could have been done to respond to the needs of young people. For example, I normally highlight the issue of disadvantaged youth in our country today. People prefer to refer to them as Zogos. We've seen over a period of time a gradual, I term it as a gradual Zogoization of the Liberian society, primarily by young people. And how is it happening? People are leaving high school, getting hooked up with drugs, and getting hooked up with alcohol abuse. And over a period of 6 months to a year, someone who you see with a bright future leaves high school and is automatically on the streets and is addicted to drugs. I don't think the government has done a lot to address the drug pandemic that I believe is affecting this country. There's also the question of the type of education we get. The government has done a lot to expand access to education. So there are more people in school now than there were in 2005. There are more young people in primary education than there were before. But the question we must ask is, what sort of education are they getting? You will recall the infamous statement about educational sector being a mess. All right? So the question now is not just about access. It's a question of quality. What sort of education are we giving to our young people? Are they prepared to go out into the world outside of Liberia and compete with their peers in the sub-region, in Africa, or even beyond the shores of this continent? That's the question we ought to be asking. Another issue is again this question of healthcare. In 2014, most of us who were here, we saw what the Ebola pandemic did to this country. We have a youthful population of close to 61%. So everything that affects this country, just extract 61% and attach it to young people. So if we lost about 5,000 people during the Ebola pandemic, it simply means that out of that 5,000, 61%, maybe close to 3,000 of them were young people. So I think that while we've struggled in the first term of this government to lay the foundation for peace and reconciliation and consolidation of democracy in our country, I think the second term should have been where direct investments would have been made in the interest of young people, and that's why I have my issues. I don't think a lot has been done in that regard.
So, from my standpoint, the first 6 years was a time of reconsolidation, and then after the 6 years, you expected something more of direct investment, like you said, implementation, but then that's what the issue is with the government not working directly to target, those cardinal issues. Now, looking at things from more of a general or holistic standpoint, and as a critical thinker and somebody knowledgeable about, youthful participation, looking at your profile, I'd like to know, how do you see Liberia in compliance with the African Union Youth Charter? The African Union Youth Charter, referencing Chapter 11, that talks about, participation, political participation of young people, and Chapter 12 that also talks about every state, should have a national youth policy for a comprehensive and coherent drive of young people. So we'll soon take our break, and I hope you can answer those questions very strategically. I know you have the calories to do that, as we demonstrated. Viewers, keep watching as we take a short break, and we'll be right back. Well, a warm welcome back to Youth and Society today. We're very privileged to have Anthony Kanyo Bagbala here as our guest today, and we discussing lengthily the issue of the National Youth Manifesto as to how Liberia fits in the National Youth Manifesto and how the manifesto can have a positive trickle down in every echelon of our society today. Just before we took our break, I posed a question asking our studio guest for his perspective on the African Union Youth Charter, looking at Chapter 11 that talks about political participation, and Chapter 12 that talks about state parties that are signatories to the Charter, the African Union Youth Charter, having a comprehensive and coherent national youth policy that is youth-driven. So, Mr. Bala, I would like to know, how do you see Liberia fitting in? Is Liberia complying with the AU Youth Charter looking at, or earmarking Chapter 11 and 12?
Well, I think, like I said before, we always must try to unpack, disaggregate what political participation is all about. Because there will always be a degree of participation, and particularly youth participation. For example, if you look at Liberia right now, we're in the midst of a political campaign.
Sure.
And if you go out there into the communities, the majority of the people you see in t-shirts at the rallies, you know, singing the battle cries and the different songs in their communities, these are predominantly young people. And they are part either supporting a candidate or against another candidate, and they're taking a stand. Now, that can be classified rightly as participation. But then we must also expand on the whole question of participation to say, what sort of participation? All right? In my view, what the AU Chapter 11 talks about when it says political participation, it means having a seat at the table and being able to direct the way things evolve in the political space within your country.
More of like, I'm not quoting you, but young people being decision makers and not mere, frontline campaign people.
Exactly. That is my point. And that's where you find, if you take participation from that lens, then you see there's a huge gap in terms of the kind of participation we see for young people. But also, mind you, there are other forms of participation as well.
Sure.
I think over the last 6 years, and this is something that I will give kudos to Madam President for, we've seen a lot of young people go into the executive branch of government as appointed officials. Now they are there, they are occupying functionary positions, which mean that they are participating in a fashion. But again, I still try to unpack that kind of participation. Are they the ones shaping the agenda? Are they the ones determining the trajectory of the country? Or are they mere rubber stamps, for a process so that we demonstrate that they are young people?
Like they are being used as faces for political participation, but in actuality, the decision is being made by people at the back.
Well,
is that where you're driving?
I'm trying to put it out there for people to think critically. It's not for me, to proffer
judgmental on the issue.
Absolutely. So yeah, so you can look at that and say, are they shaping the agenda? Because I believe that the whole idea of youthful political participation as espoused by the AU Charter 11 is about having people who can shape the trajectory. I give an example. In Liberia, there's this false illusion of youthfulness. Emmanuel Macron became Prime Minister of France at 39. Now he is barely a few years older than me. What distinguishes a Macron from any other young person in our country today? It is simply that the society has come to terms with the fact that an ability to lead is premised on certain things. It's premised on your education, your experience, your ability, and how you've been involved with the political space. It's not a question of age. And so when we start to push the boundaries, people like us, Kanye Bala and other young people who are now vying for political office because we believe we want to give voice to young people at that level, we're actually taking the AU Charter and putting it into action. Now the flip side of what you asked concerning, sorry, I'm just missing the second part of your question on Chapter 12,
yeah,
which was specifically about
state parties kind of like ratifying that particular.
Exactly. So now I think we've done that, and that's one of the things Liberia does very well. We pass a lot of laws. We adopt. In law it's called ratification.
Ratification.
Whenever you have like these national or international organizations or international non-governmental organizations or governmental organizations, they'll pass certain charters or rules. Like the UN will pass the Charter on Corruption, Violence Against Women. S.E.I.L is there on the rights of a child. There are many of these.
So many.
Okay, for it to become binding in our constituency or in our jurisdiction in Liberia, we must adapt it and ratify it. Liberia is very good at ratifying documents like that. So, ratifying it and having a youth policy and passing a youth law, for me, is just the first step. Whether we take it and now begin to implement it, people will normally tell you, if you want to know how serious a government is about a particular issue, look at their budget. If we say education for young people is a priority in our country, then look at the budget. What percent are we spending on the budget? Arguably, we should be spending around anywhere from 17 to 20% on education.
Education.
Is that what we are doing now? So if we really say we are prioritizing education, that is where we'll be putting our money, isn't that so? And the same goes for health. The same goes for all of the other areas that are critical to youth development. So I believe that, yes, we've complied in the literature, but in actuality, have we actually done those things? I mean, that's something for the public to... I think basically is to say that in Liberia and also in Africa, there is this false illusion of being a youth, meaning that you have all the time in the world. And I'll tell you, you don't have all the time in the world. Your youthful age is the time you maximize on your creative capacities and you formulate yourself into that person you want to project into the future. I'm not saying become an old, boring person without a social life, but I'm saying you can micromanage, you can multitask, and still pay attention to the important issues while also having a social life.
Sure.
So don't waste your youthful age. Continue to campaign for the right things, get an education, develop a sense of direction, and be critical about leadership in our country. Because as a philosopher once said, everything starts and ends with leadership.
Everything starts and ends with leadership, according to our studio guest today, referencing a philosopher. We're so sorry that this is all the time we have today to have this very important discussion. Today we looked at the National Youth Manifesto, how can this manifesto help better shape our country as a whole and impact the life of young people in Liberia during elections and after elections. And to discuss such a cardinal issue we hosted today Anthony Bala. He's Anthony Bala. He's an aspirant in Mozarado County District number 3 and also a very loud voice in activism as it relates to the youthful sector. Today was a very great time. Again, this show is the Youth and Society program that is brought to you by Light TV, empowered by the Sustainable Educational Initiative Liberia Incorporated. I presented a show today, Nathan Nbili, the founder and executive director. Thank you very much and keep following Light TV.